Oh man, this latest chapter of One Piece had me feeling goosebumps all throughout, and I can't lie, I was getting a bit teary-eyed towards the end there. We firstly open up with a pretty interesting cover page of Germa successfully escaping Whole Cake Island and therefore being on the move. Now that Sanji's latent abilities have begun to truly manifest, it will most definitely be interesting to see him meet his now clearly inferior siblings, those who lost their humanity in exchange for power, whereas Sanji possesses both. However, in the flower capital of Wano, many people opted to flee on account of the draconic visage they presumed to be Kaido. However, as expressed by Momonosuke in his draconic form, there was no need for them to run away. And so, understandably, the people were confused, as the notion of there being two dragons was bizarre enough. The occurrence to be seen in front of the castle was very strange. The fact that Lady Komurasaki, who was believed to have died, was before their very eyes. They would look to the man they believed to be named Kyoshiro for answers, but another visage would suddenly bring about even more disbelief. As he emerged from the smoke like this was a WWE entrance, Ginman would wonder if the rest of them would even be recognized at this point, considering how much time has passed and the fame of the aforementioned two. But once he was out, my guy would strike a pose that could not be overlooked, and the people immediately recognized him. However, such a thing was truly difficult to fathom, as he was believed to have died along with the Castle Oden 20 years prior. As these valiant heroes all began to emerge, the people would begin to question if they were all in a dream, or perhaps they'd passed on to the next life. It was just that unbelievable for them. But fantasy or not, they all knew they were certainly in store for something truly monumental. And as such, members of the crowd were sent to quickly grab a light scroll snail for the sake of the entire country bearing witness to this occasion in unison. This ensemble of bygone heroes was astonishing. The Red Scabbards have returned. After 20 long years, Lady Toki's prophecy has finally come true. The countrywide broadcast of this occurrence would then begin, as most occupants would consider this to perhaps be on account of the tremors they had previously felt. But whatever the case, everyone was tuned in from all across Wano. But heading back to Onigashima, we would have some Straw Hats banter, as with Yamato claiming to be Kaido's son, the likes of Frankie and Brook were on high alert. However, Yamato would be quick to try and temper their aggression, as of course, they were all on the same side. Furthermore, Yamato had been gleefully following the many escapades of the crew for a while. A crew known to be made up of some pretty odd-looking folks, but certainly being antagonized by a skeleton and a cyborg at once would be a lot to handle for just about anyone. But of course, Yamato too was a bit odd in appearance on account of the horns and such. Meanwhile, Sanji was getting closer to them all after overhearing the mention of Kaido having his son, and was furious. However, Yamato would then go on to say that as Kozuki Oden, they'd all be sailing together from now on. However, the name Yamato was fine for them to be called by as well, which is really hype for all of us as fans, but the reactions here from the crew themselves would certainly be mixed. Nami and Usopp were absolutely blown away in disbelief. Frankie was more neutral and on the fence. Brook would happily approve, as Sanji would approve even more so. These two, mind you, being pretty fond of effeminate visages. Robin from afar would be amused by the prospect, while Jinbei would remain loyal to the word of Luffy alone and only be convinced by that, which Yamato would certainly agree to. However, the subject of Luffy's health would be called into question, as of course, he had most definitely gone above and beyond in his clash against Kaido. Not to mention his Gear 5th form would be considered as well. However, before we could seriously delve deep into that subject matter, Yamato's attention would be drawn elsewhere, which could very well mean there is plenty more to unpack in that particular realm. But anyways, Yamato would be quick to reprimand the Beast Pirate stragglers who had begun to run away. However, these guys did not want to end up being servants, and with this, I'm really curious what will become of this crew from now on. I mean, are these extras now under the control of Yamato? Will Morgans be able to report that Luffy has absorbed a portion of the Beast Pirates into his own crew? That would be pretty monumental for sure. Whatever the case, it was now clear to Jinbei that this person truly was not an enemy of theirs. From there, Hamlet too would join Yamato in this sort of talk, which would cause Usopp to question just how long the artificial devil fruit users would be under Tama's control, and the answer to that would be 1 month. She'd express that usually animals go back to their normal behavior afterwards. However, some actually remain tamed, as ultimately they get to choose the life they prefer. And after hearing this, Speed, the horse smile user, would call out to her master, and while hugging Tama, express that she is happy as things are and would very much like to stay by her side. This made Tama very happy. However, she would admit that despite wanting the two to stick together, instead of having her as a servant, she would much rather think of her as a mother. Such a pure and bright-eyed declaration that caught Nami off guard and absolutely blew Speed away. But now it was time to resume the greatest declaration in the history of modern Wano. The Scabbards were all kneeling before their new lord. The mysterious figure would then begin to emerge as he'd express the fact that it had been a very long 20 years since the death of his father. These words alone were enough to loosen everyone's jaws. The man would commend them all for having survived despite their terrible circumstances. The freedom felt by the Fire Festival would not conclude, as beginning tomorrow, the people of Wano would be able to live as they so pleased. A sentiment which placed fear and reluctance in the people who were so conditioned by the cruelty of Orochi. But the man would continue, expressing that they may drink as much as they so desire. They would no longer be charged for access to clean water. The putrid factories which had so negatively impacted their once lush and beautiful lands would be abolished. Slavery too would no longer be acceptable and or exist within Wano from this day onwards. Tama would then recognize this man to be Momonosuke as she recalled her own life up until now. The factory which her parents worked in was essentially a death sentence, and one that they knew would eventually claim their lives as well. Despite the pain of it, they knew they had to tell their daughter, and so they did. However, even despite their deaths, Tama, being the resilient young girl that she is, would urge her departed parents to rest in peace as she would be just fine. Tama from then on would go on to sell hand-woven hats and such, but of course, despite the viability and desirability of such things, everyone was poor and had nothing to spare. While starving and in atrocious conditions, Tama still kept a smile on her face. Eventually, however, she would meet Tengu, who would purchase a hat from her. He'd presume the little girl to be an orphan and would furthermore urge her to not lose hope, as it would only be a few more years of waiting. After all, the mighty warriors of the Kozuki clan would make their triumphant return. That when the time comes, they'd all finally be rid of Kaido and his forces who'd poisoned their land. A message which gave the girl hope and enough motivation to keep doing her best until then. As in the present, an overwhelmed Tama would clutch tightly onto Nami's clothing. She would then begin to cry. The reality was here. They had won. Their suffering was over. She'd remember what Luffy had told her, that by the time these Straw Hats leave the country, it would be a place where she could eat as much as she wants each and every single day. And this was a promise that Luffy has kept. Momonosuke would continue. The tyranny of Orochi and Kaido was now finally over forever. As an unconscious Luffy continued to smile, Momonosuke would express that he'd met many powerful and passionate friends on his voyage, and together, their ninja, pirate, mink, samurai alliance raided Onigashima. Orochi, Kaido, and the Beast Pirates, all of the monsters that had kept them living in fear, had now been vanquished once and for all. And so with this, a wave of emotions would overcome the people as Kid would question the notion of our alliance. Kid was of course still a bit rough around the edges, but not an outright objection. The people would tearfully rejoice. Momonosuke would express that they will never forget the heroes who had paved the way to make this all possible. As Law remained in silence and Carrot had tears in her eyes and a smile, both having lost those who in some way or another helped create the opportunity for this major event. Tengu was with Toko with his hand on her head, as from there, Momonosuke would quietly call Kinemon for a bit of guidance as he wasn't really sure what to say next, as his closest vassal would tell him to fake it till you make it. As Momonosuke attempted to resolve himself, he recalled the words of Luffy during their battle against Kaido when the captain questioned if Momo was just a figurehead, and additionally if anything in the world still seemed scary to him after facing Kaido as he had. Momonosuke would then speak once more. He proclaimed that his name was given to him by his father and that it means second to none. As such, he swore to live up to that name by restoring the barren lands of Wano to the paradise they once were. But this was not a task he could complete alone. It was one that would require the strength of the people. He had transcended the last 20 years for the sake of saving their home. That from this moment onwards, Wano would be led by him, Kozuki Momonosuke, as we would additionally receive the full reveal of his adult form. And just like Nekomamushi and the rest of the gang, this chapter really had me emotional. This has been such a long time coming. Their suffering is over. Momonosuke, like Luffy, would keep his promise. To his beloved mother and father, he would vow to continue along the path that they had paved for him. The true Shogun has returned. As the sakura petals of a new season dance about the hopeful sky of the future, the many warriors of Wano may finally lay their arms to rest. Momonosuke in actuality may only be 8 years old, but he is a man at heart. He and his once younger, yet now mentally older sister would finally reunite as she could not contain herself much more, which brought a smile to his face. Despite lacking in physical strength, Momonosuke will compensate for this by way of his devotion to duty and endless compassion, which is precisely what the people of Wano need so desperately right now. It would then be expressed that this very man will one day be known far and wide as one of Wano's greatest leaders, that we have just bore witness to the birth of the great Shogun, Kozuki Momonosuke, which is to say that there is a lot left in store for the country of Wano in regards to the attention of the world and the direction they will now be led in. A direction which, unbeknownst to Momonosuke, may very well include the borders of this country being open as a result of Luffy's clash against Kaido. Yet despite believing them ill-prepared for such things, we should all have faith in Momonosi's navigation of this reality alongside his many vassals, comrades, and subjects. The Wano arc of One Piece has finally reached its conclusion. It is over, and what a ride it has been. That being said, there is still plenty more to be covered in regards to the direct aftermath of all this, but then it's off to whatever comes next, so yeah, pretty exciting times all around. And hopefully you'll be willing to stick around with us through all of that. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.